result of earning. Giving is a result of earning. And so I want you to see this in Genesis chapter 14. We have now somewhat wealthy Abraham, and Abraham comes across this mysterious priest from the city of Salem, which will become Jerusalem, and that guy's name is Melchizedek. Now, Melchizedek is the subject of all kinds of extra-biblical folklore. We know very little about Melchizedek other than what we find here in just a couple of verses, and then later in what the author of Hebrews says about Melchizedek. All our other information about Melchizedek is either speculative or is from extra-biblical sources or whatever, and most of them were just spinning a yarn about who Melchizedek might have been. Melchizedek becomes this character that's the subject of a tall tale, if you will, in even biblical era times. So not biblical in truth nature, but in that era, Melchizedek was a big deal. But Abraham, considered to be for early Jewish people and for all the patriarchs and all that running up until Jesus, is the big dog. And Hebrews points this out, the author of Hebrews points this out, that what a great priest Melchizedek must have been for Abraham to have given him a tenth of all of his wealth. You see that in Genesis 14, 18 through 20, that's that story. Now, I'm assuming that Abraham had come by his wealth because God had blessed him as he promised to do, as God promised to do. And then Abraham, based on his earnings, what his hands had caused and God had blessed, gave from his earnings. So he didn't steal from the next guy in order to give to Melchizedek, right? It was his, he owned it, and he gave it then to Melchizedek. All right, if you won your great wealth in the lottery, I would advise giving some of that, but I want you to, if you won the Powerball, what was the last Powerball? It was like $200 million or something like that. Don't write a $20 million check to the church. $1 million would be okay. $2 million may be okay. $20 million is, you know how astronomical that figure is? It's a tithe, but the money is not earning. You may gift it in some Christian way. First, I think you would need to have stumbled across the lottery ticket and just happened to be a winner rather than having participated in the lottery. But when it comes to disciplined giving, we're talking about giving related to our earnings, first and foremost. That which God has enabled us to gather in through the sweat of our brow, through our labor. Jacob, in Genesis 28:22, many years later, has a vision of angels descending. Jacob's ladder, you remember this from Sunday school, most of us do. And the angels descending back and forth from earth and into heaven. And he says to himself that if God causes all of these things that he has promised in the dream to happen, then he will, once he earns, or that has this blessing that God gave, then he will give a tenth back to God out of gratitude for God. So again, what we have is Jacob promising to give from what he gains, what he earns. I think we have a very frail theology of work. It's so frail that most of us do not imagine ourselves working in the new heaven and new earth. But I think that's a falsehood and an imagination that's come along that somehow work is an evil. Have you ever had a truly successful day of work? Was that not invigorating? Some of you ladies, you're stay-at-home moms, and everything went right in that day, and all the kids did their work, and they got their chores done, and, things are right with the world. You go to the job, you do your thing, and everything happens right during that day. Not many times does that day come along. Most of us feel like we're swimming for the surface perpetually, trying to get our head above water. But there are those days where we feel a great fulfillment in the work that we do. The product of that earning should be the gift back to God, the tithe. And I think the correlation between that which we earn and that which we give has often been lost. A result of earning is the gratitude and opportunity before God to give back to Him. So the gift is the result of increase and increased possession. It's not the result of impulse or a bargain with God. Impulsive giving, so the panhandler or the sorry, sad story that you heard and you just tugs at your heart and you want to give. Now, I'm not saying those emotional gifts are always wrong. I'm saying be cautious and wise about those emotional gifts. Plenty of people can show you on television the sad stories of the situations of the world and say, if you will just give money, you will feed the masses. And there are a few legitimate mercy agencies around there, but you need to know what you're doing with that. There's also the theology of prosperity that's out there that is essentially a pagan bargain with God. The prosperity movement that promises to you riches and blessing if only you give to that ministry, that church, that preacher, that is a repackaged, retitled paganism. Anytime we say, Lord, I'm going to give to you so that you will give back to me, we have struck a bargain. And we have failed to understand the basic mechanism by which God accomplishes the mission of Christ, which is through everyday folks earning and then giving out of their earnings. All right, so that's the baseline. When you're talking about the tithe, giving is a result of our earnings. And so if you're jobless and you're not earning, then listen, at that point you're not required to be tithing because you're not earning. Now maybe you've got dividends, you've got residual income of some kind. A few of those people, if you've got that, great, God bless you. Those are earnings that you tithe from. But if you're struggling with joblessness, then you ought not be struggling with guilt for not giving, and you certainly ought not be giving in order to get the next job. That's the bargain. All right? Some of us have there is a Baptist brand on the prosperity gospel. It's the ambiguous God will bless you, usually preached out of Malachi. Now you need to define what that blessing is. Sometimes the blessing is a great lesson from God in the way that we spend our money. Sometimes the lesson from God is a heavy weight of financial burden such that we change our behaviors. See, God's always in the business of growing us up, even in matters of money. And so when we say blessing is in kind, that is, I give financially and God blesses me back financially, then we have wrongly understood what blessing, the full scope of what blessing means. All right. So, then, what is the result of disciplined giving? And I think that first word is critical in this. Disciplined giving results in ongoing ministry. All right, so I want to look then at a few places in which we find both the direction of our giving, what is supposed to be the housing of that giving, and the execution or operations that come from that giving. We find in Deuteronomy 14, before there is a tabernacle, and well, Deuteronomy is a restatement of what has, or a sermon or a series of sermons that's preached just before or just on the other side of the Jordan before the people, before Moses goes up into the mountain and dies, and Joshua leads them in. So the timeline is generally from Exodus, but in Deuteronomy we have recorded in Deuteronomy 14. Deuteronomy 14. Need thicker pages for this task. Deuteronomy 14, we have verse 22. You shall tithe all the yield of your seed that comes from the field year by year, And before the Lord your God, in the place that he will choose to make his name dwell there, you shall eat the tithe of your grain, of your wine, and of your oil, and the firstborn of your herd and flock, that you may learn to fear the Lord your God always. The tithes were given for the upkeep of the tabernacle, and both the priests shared in the overflow, that is the tithe of animal and sacrifice and the various ways in which people were to give. They shared in that. And so we ask this question, for them the tithe was given at the house of God, the place where God shall set his name. But I want you to understand something, that before God had established the tabernacle and then later the temple, the direction or the holding tank for those tithes of the people was the place where God set his name. Temporarily in the tabernacle, then more permanently in the temple, and then finally, I think we find wherever the Lord places his name, and the Lord places his name in the community of believers, the gathered assembly. Now, for us in the United States, this gets boiled down to a corporate structure. So I don't know if you know this, but Cana is incorporated, so that if there's a problem, the corporation gets sued, and not every individual member gets sued. So to whom does the property belong? Does it belong to the preacher or the trustees or the deacons or some other, or the committees, or to whom does it belong? Well, it belongs to the legal entity called Cana Baptist Church Incorporated. And Cana Baptist Church Incorporated owns property. All churches, well, most churches, not all churches, most churches are set up this way. The property belongs to the corporation, and the corporation, as a legal entity, has bank accounts. So when you give your money from your bank account, it goes to the church's bank account. Who can write from that bank account? Well, that's all in our bylaws, policies, procedures, and all that kind of stuff. Now, that's a relatively new structure. Back in the day, where did the monies go to? In most of the world, people don't have bank accounts. In India, something like 30% of the people have bank accounts. So how do you operate community funds in that setting? Well, this is the point. The house of God is the community, the covenanted community of God's people that has decided that through their combined efforts, they will accomplish the mission and the work of God. So that is the location of New Testament tithing. Now, I will ask you, if you own cattle, please don't bring the 10th of every cattle up here and leave it on the lawn. Go ahead and turn that into cash first and then bring the proceed, all right? Do me a favor. But the point is simple, right? We have a variety of ways in which the house of God can be defined, but in general, we can with some confidence say that it is the place, the house of God is the place where God chooses to place his name. And that means the community of believers. This house of God contains the offerings of God's people made for specific purposes. So what are the acceptable purposes for making a gift? All right, so now we're talking about not just tithing, but a variety of gifts that one might make. All right, our purposes for giving can include personal devotion. So in Luke 21, 1 through 4, the widow is giving not from her earnings, but from everything that she has. A full devotion, she gives a penny. Essentially, it'd be like cutting a penny in half. She gives the smallest unit that she has. And somehow, Jesus, when he sees this, sitting across from the money change box, knows that that's everything that she had. We don't know how he knows that, but he knows that. And he commends her for giving everything that she had. Now, I think it's interesting in that Jesus doesn't necessarily condemn everybody else. And that's not necessarily the point. What Jesus commends is the fact that she gives everything. Or we find in Exodus 35:22, there are donations for the tabernacle. These are above and beyond the tithe. These are so that the tabernacle articles and bowls and plates and all the things of the ritual cult system that was developed around the tabernacle could be developed, right, and could be made. So they needed gold and silver and all that stuff. And so that was all put on a rug and then collected and held in trust until it could be deployed and made into the objects for the tabernacle. But that is a devotional purpose. The people were glad to give it so that God's tabernacle could be constructed. By the way, there's not a linkage between the house we're in now and the tabernacle. There's a linkage between the people of God as a community and the tabernacle. So the people of God in that community, given a whole set of circumstances, may in fact decide to build a roof over their head, just as a family might. And that's what we have. However, it can become excessive. I remember one pastor talking about the $32.5 million that they needed to raise in order to build their auditorium and their new space, made this comment. It was a very public comment. He said, and it's near verbatim quote, he said, if Jerry Jones can have a temple to the football gods, then God's people ought to have a building worthy of the glory and honor of God. Okay? I think that is a crass and arrogant statement. The building has nothing to do with the glory and honor of God. The community of believers built as the temple of God, bricks in the temple, 1 Peter, bricks in the temple of this new temple. If they so choose to mobilize their money in the purpose of the mission because of a free will desire to build a roof over their head, then God bless them as they do it. But we ought not make it into what it's not. All right? Matthew 26:13. The woman anointed Jesus with expensive perfume, worth many days' wages, and she was reprimanded for it, and Jesus comes to her defense. Jesus, in that gift being offered by that woman, what he says is this extravagant gift for the purposes of personal love and affection for Christ is a worthy offering. And he goes so far as to say that throughout every time that the gospel is told, so her story too will be told. And I believe that's why we have it in the canon of Scripture. It's not because it's the most, it's a beautiful story, but it is expressive of the gospel and the kind of giving that we might do toward Jesus. All right. Your purposes can include retribution or repayment. Now, we are uncomfortable with this. But look at Luke 9:8. Just turn there. It's the story of Zacchaeus. Luke 9:8. So Jesus comes into it is not Luke 9:8. Well, somebody find it and tell me where it is. We can keep going. Luke 19:8. What's wrong with me? I mean, I've been doing this a lot lately. I think there's something broken with... I'm going to blame it on my heart. It's a heart surgery thing, you know? I can't get that right. Luke 19:8. If you're at home watching this and recording, Luke 19:8. Zacchaeus climbs up in the tree. All I remember this story is how small a man he was, right? Zacchaeus was a wee little man was he. Climbed up in the sycamore tree for the Lord he wanted to see. And I forget the middle part. Jesus comes up and says, Zacchaeus, you come down, for I'm coming to your house today. I'm coming to your house today. You remember that song? That's all I remember of that story. All right, Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus clamors to see Christ. He's the chief tax collector. He's got many tax agents working for him. The most hated man in town, unless you're a Roman. The Romans love him, and all his people hate him. And Jesus calls to him out of the tree. Verse 6, he hurries, he comes down, and he receives Jesus joyfully. And when all the people saw it, they grumbled and said of Jesus, he's gone in to be the guest of a man who is a sinner. And Zacchaeus, look at what Zacchaeus does. There's two things that Zacchaeus is accomplishing here. Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, "Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold." Now, catch what Zacchaeus is doing. Number one, Zacchaeus is standing up for the honor of the Lord. He's saying to the people, by announcing it out loud, I'm a changed man because the Lord has called to me. That's the first thing that Zacchaeus is saying. You can't miss that. The second thing, in talking about his goods, he is saying, I will pay out of my wealth retribution to all the people that I have potentially defrauded. If they stake their claim, I will pay back fourfold. I'll give half of everything I have off the top right now to the poor. I'm a changed man. So why is Jesus does not reprimand this gift? Look at what Jesus says about it. And Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. The gift itself, at least it seems, the taxation was rightful under the rules of the government of their day. What Zacchaeus is giving, and the reason he's giving, is because he is making recompense for his sin. He's proving that he's a changed man. He once loved money. Now he uses money to accomplish the things that are right before God. That's an acceptable gift to the Lord. I think every evidence in this passage, maybe we sometimes miss this. We think about the story, the song. It's not just about the calling of Zacchaeus, it's also about the rightful use of the gift. Purpose can include aid, so a merciful gift. Romans 15:25 through 27 is Paul talking about coming to see, likely returning through Spain, coming to see the church in Rome, and hoping to collect and bring a gift for the ease of the suffering of the saints in Jerusalem. And so he's going to take a gift to Jerusalem from the Greek-speaking churches, the Gentile churches, and take it to Jerusalem because of the famine that was occurring at that time. So that gift was given with a purpose. It's for aid or mercy. So herein, there's appropriate place for the ease of suffering of other people. Right? And out of gratitude. 2 Corinthians 9:7 speaks to that the Lord loves a cheerful giver. 2 Corinthians 9:7. It was really starting in 6. The point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. Now, what is this in the context with? It's in the context of Romans 15:25, likely the same gift that's being collected, chapter 9, verse 1 of 2 Corinthians. He's collecting a special gift for the aid of people, but what he's saying is, in verse 7, that you must decide not under compulsion, but based on what God has spoken to you, not the tithe of earnings, but the exceptional amount that you choose to give. Verse 8, and God is able to make all the grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every... Now this doesn't get read by the prosperity people. You may abound in every good work. What is he saying? He's saying God loves a cheerful giver. And when you give, you are doing a good work, and God is able to make you abound in that good work, meaning the giving. He's able to make you abound as a giver, not as a getter. That is this point. And so in Romans, if you take it, it's kind of a sandwiched theology. He tells them that since salvation is from the Jews to the Gentiles, then it's right that the Gentiles should participate in the aid of the Jews in Jerusalem. Actually, there may be a broader category of a unifying gift. That's certainly how Paul treated that gift in Romans 15. Disciplined giving, in any case, involves contributions that amplify and or assist the believers based on the distribution of work and wealth throughout God's kingdom. Why is it so important that Americans be concerned with international missions? Well, I'll tell you one main reason is because we have the financial horsepower to get a lot of stuff done. And listen, for guys like me who pastor American churches where we talk about spending thousands of dollars without blinking much of an eye, let me give you a comparison. Maybe a $60,000 a year living expense. So let's say you make $60,000 a year, and that quality of life can be bought for about $8,000 in India, most parts of India. This is a huge disparity of things. Now, there's lots of ways to mess people up with American money, meaning other countries up with American money. So we're not talking about that. But I am saying that for our missionaries, the biggest and most important role we play in international missions is not making short-term trips, but is shoveling coal. You know what coal does? It allows the fire to burn. To whom do you shovel that coal? You shovel it to the people most equipped to be long-term embedded, language connected to the ground. And the Lord has afforded us an incredible opportunity to launch people around the world. And I tell you, I think one of our biggest roles and the biggest, most important reasons we have to pursue healthy ministry and mission engagement is so that we are financially equipped to support the stuff God is doing. If 75% of what we give goes to feeding the machine here, we have a disparity between what we're giving and what we're doing. All right, so disciplined giving involves contributions that amplify and or assist believers based on God's distribution of wealth throughout the kingdom. And so it's right for us to send money abroad. All right, and finally, disciplined giving is worship. All right, I'm going to hustle through this part so we can have some prayer time at the end. Disciplined giving is worship. I want to remind us, giving is a right response to God with our increase, with our earnings. Worship defined is a right response to God. So when I earn money, what's the right response to God? It's to give a portion of that. When I give a portion of that, I have worshiped God. There's no sense in which God then needs to reciprocate to me. My earnings actually equip me, allow me to give to God. Right? That's the idea here. So giving as worship is not hoping to get something out of the bargain. Giving as worship is God has allowed me to earn this, and what does He ask in return as my rightful worship? Well, it's that tithe, that tenth. Disciplined giving should be conducted, one, as a tenth of your increase. All right, so here's the straight line kind of teaching on tithe. Disciplined giving should be conducted as a tenth of increase. It should be conducted or given to a place called by Christ's name and represented by the community of believers, so one's local church. I think this is important in the internet age where I can very much be connected to a bazillion different ministries. I think it's really important to say that my tithe ought to go to the community of people with whom I serve. That is, I need to move my money along with my actions. I think we've had a problem with this. This is then the other side of the coin for short-term missions. Being Southern Baptist, we give money through the International Mission Board, and it's almost a hands-off approach to sending missionaries, because many that we support we never know. Now, we've had the blessing of knowing some of the people that are launching, and that's a beautiful thing, and they get great support, and they don't have to come back and raise more money, and so it's really convenient and really a great thing. I'm not dogging that at all, but the downside of it is that our money's going out in a way that we lose personal contact with those people. They get orphaned from being part of our church. And so they're out there almost on their own, closer to the people out there rather than to the people who have launched them. And obviously some of that is just structurally embedded. It's going to happen, but when we give, we ought to have some locality to our giving. And it's easy to give afar, to send it overseas or whatever. It's harder for us when we're invested and we look at the budget at our yearly budget meeting. Those are fun, right? Everybody's like, yay, budget meeting. And yet that is part of the locality of what we're doing. Worthy of our scrutiny to say, how is this being stewarded? All right. Disciplined giving should be a cheerful expression of dependence and gratitude and confidence in God. And I think the most important part of that statement is the cheerful part. You can be stressed about giving and still be cheerful about giving. You might have to cover your eyes and drop the check, just let it go. That doesn't mean you're not cheerful just because you have some anxiety. At times, that gift is so important to our spiritual health because it teaches us, it works in us to form dependence on God, gratitude for what God's doing. There's no better way to see God move than in the distress of a financial situation and a willingness to give nonetheless in faith and watch as God takes care of things. All right. I've provided, and this is online. I've provided a little bit of a worksheet, and if you go to this in Discovery, you can find this worksheet, and it will help you work through your giving plan. Now, as with everything, I'm not one who says, okay, so you're underwater anyway, you're putting groceries on the credit card, and so you need to start tithing tomorrow. If you're not. Here's my counsel on this. Get the tithe right first. And what that may require you to do is value it first of all. And then say, okay, I need a timeline. I'm underwater in debt, and so I can't tithe because I owe more to the bank than I'm worth. And so what am I to do? I'm not saying tomorrow you walk out and you make sure you tithe in order that somehow God's going to turn the situation around immediately. Most of our financial problems take weeks to get into and years to get out of. What I am suggesting is you write down the conditions that you need to get to begin growing your percentage. All right, so maybe you can give $20. All right, so you give $20. Maybe that's the sacrifice part. You give $20, it's a sacrifice, and so you give it. And you say, my next goal is to give 50, weekly, monthly, whatever you can do, right? Work yourself. Here's what you're doing. When you're making room for your tithe, you're actually, via spiritual devotion, walking in the Spirit, you are confronting the financial issues that you have. Sometimes we just don't earn enough. Right? Literally, we got more expenses than what we can earn. and we're living in a shack, and we've got lots of hardship. So what are we to do? I'm saying the cheerful part of it is a control element to me. It says that God is not so concerned with the percentage, He's concerned with us getting there. So this is part of redemptive community. We ought all be tithers, but some of us are going to have to take some time and patiently work on our finances so that we create the room. Now, here's the thing that happens. We say, well, whenever I get independently wealthy, then I'll tithe. That's not the right condition. I think that's where Malachi 3:8 comes in. Test me in this and see if I'll not open the doors of heaven, the floodgates of heaven. I think Malachi 3:8 comes in when we begin to test the Lord. And that doesn't mean we drop the full tenth. I'm saying start working your way toward that. That is a financial goal. And if you're not there, get past the guilt and whatever you think it ought to be, and just start working on it. So when will you get to the place where you feel comfortable with the tithe? When you got $30,000 in the bank? Maybe you got it now, but most of us, we would never tithe. I'm saying you want that to be the earliest moment. So work the percentage, work down the percentage of other things and the distractions of life when there are those, and just take a steady process and chart a path to get to a place of both obedience but also devotion, cheerful devotion toward God in your giving. Just as most of us can't start tomorrow with a daily prayer time, most of us can't start this week with a full tithe if we haven't been doing it. So work toward it. All right? Throw the guilt off, take the pressure off, and just get a plan and start working on it. All right? I think that's the best way to approach it. God loves a cheerful giver. God's not a tax man. Nobody loves the tax man, except for Jesus loved the tax man. All right. Let's spend some time in prayer. We've got a little time, and we're going to go ahead and in the feed, folks. If you've tuned in via the live stream, thank you. I want to invite you to be here with us in person. The singing is a lot better in person, 6:30 on Wednesdays. And so as we sign off, God bless you, and thanks for tuning in. We're going to have some